There's been a lot of talk about Melly Plinius, and whether or not she's Russian, or, to be more specific, half Russian. Some fans seem pretty convinced, while the IDV wiki has her listed as having an unknown nationality. Naturally, this has sparked a bit of confusion among the community. So, let's ask the big question: is Melly really Russian? I've spent some time thinking about it and doing a little research. While there's definitely a chance that she could be Russian, I think it's important to point out that nothing has been officially confirmed. It's more of a possibility than a fact right now. Her origins are actually pretty unclear, and if we try to factor in historical context, things get even more complicated. Of course, we shouldn't mix real historical events too much with the IDV universe, but it's still an interesting angle to consider. So, if Melly isn't Russian, then where does she come from? What's her story? That's what we're here to figure out. In today's broadcast, we're going to take a closer look at this mystery and see what we can piece together. This is your broadcaster Silmina, signing in. Let's dive in and talk about it. Let me first give a short answer to the question of whether Melly is Russian. The short answer is, she might be. For a more detailed explanation of whether Melly is actually Russian, let's analyze her possible origins based on her name and backstory. We'll begin with her name. Melly Plinius, maiden name, Melly Ndlovu. According to various sources, the name Melly has Greek origins. It could mean brave, or perhaps more fittingly, bee. This suggests Greece as a possible origin. Now, let's consider her second name, Plinius. Plinius has ancient Roman roots. Names ending in "us" are typically ancient Roman. Consider some famous historical figures: Lepidus, Marcus Aurelius, Octavianus Augustus, Fabius Maximus, Scipio Africanus, and others. The name Plinius, sometimes shortened to Pliny, is believed to originate from Gaius Plinius Secundus. According to Wikipedia, Gaius Plinius Secundus, known in English as Pliny the Elder, was a Roman author, naturalist, natural philosopher, and naval and army commander of the early Roman Empire, and a friend of the Emperor Vespasian. Since Plinius is a Roman name, does this mean Melly is Italian? To answer that, we must consider history. In the 1st century, when Gaius Plinius lived, the Roman Empire was near its peak. The empire encompassed not only modern-day Italy, but stretched from Portugal in the west to England in the north, Albania and Iraq in the east, and Egypt in the south. Therefore, Melly could have origins in any of these regions. Confusing, right? Let's assume she has Italian roots, since Gaius Plinius was born in present-day Lombardy, Italy. Thus, based on her name, Melly Plinius appears to have Greek and Italian origins. This is quite a reference, considering the IDV writer's fondness for Greek mythology, and the fact that Roman mythology has roots in Greek mythology. Now, besides the name Melly Plinius, we have a hint from her maiden name, Ndlovu. Ndlovu is a surname rooted in Africa. According to one source, it comes from the Nguni languages spoken by the Nguni people of southern Africa. This surname is common in South Africa and Zimbabwe. If Melly's maiden name is Ndlovu, she may have African roots. However, given that she is described as Caucasian, it becomes confusing. Theorists have debated this, suggesting that Melly is either adopted or of mixed race. Let's address this. The first theory is adoption. This is plausible because, according to her backstory, Melly's family was implied to be poor. Both parents supposedly never left their village, and her mother believed the only way to become wealthy was through hard work and becoming a manor lady. In contrast, Melly pursued education for a better life. This suggests her parents viewed higher education as a luxury, implying they were from a poor background. I emphasize poor because, according to several studies, white people in 19th century South Africa generally had a higher economic standard than indigenous Africans. This was largely due to European settler policies that discriminated between white people and indigenous black people. Therefore, if Melly, being Caucasian, lived her early life in poverty, it's less likely she descended from European settlers in South Africa. Adoption by a native African family is more plausible than her originating from a poor white family in South Africa, then known as Transvaal. Now let's move on to the second theory. Melly was born of mixed race. This means either her father or mother is of African descent. This theory is also plausible. Even though native Africans may have been seen as second-class citizens by white people in Africa, attitudes were different in the British Isles. In the 19th century, many countries worldwide had abolished slavery. Consequently, former enslaved Africans in some European countries, particularly Great Britain, began to be seen not as slaves, but as fellow human beings. There are even records of interracial relationships in 19th century Britain. Either way, her maiden name suggests some African ancestry. Therefore, we can add Africa as a possible origin for Melly, along with Greece and Italy. Now we address an intriguing question. Is Melly Russian? To explore this, we must examine the source of this idea. There are at least two sources supporting the theory of Melly being Russian, but these ideas don't provide a definitive answer. The first supporting idea comes from Ashes of Memory Part 1. In a scene where Alice first meets Melly, Melly's posture makes Alice wonder if she frequently engages in outdoor activities or is of Eastern European descent.
She has a tall and toned figure, so she's either of Eastern European descent or engages in outdoor activities all year round.
This suggests a possibility of Melly being Eastern European. However, Eastern Europe is a large and broadly defined area, geographically and otherwise. Russia is only part of Eastern Europe. Historically, three major powers could be considered part of Eastern Europe during Melly's era: the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and part of Austria-Hungary. This scene suggests Melly either frequently engages in outdoor activities or is of Russian, Ottoman, or Austro-Hungarian descent. The second supporting idea comes from her S-tier skin, Sophia, from Season 11, Essence 3. It is described that Sophia may be based on Grand Princess Consort of Moscow Sofia Paleologina, explaining her expensive and intricate Russian attire. However, this raises a question. Can the description of an Essence's costume be considered canon for the main character? If Melly is described as Russian in this Essence, is she canonically Russian? Let's consider another example. Anne Lester, the toy merchant, and her first S-tier skin, Shining Feather. Shining Feather first appeared in Season 16, Essence 1. It has an Arabian or North African theme, and Anne Lester is depicted as being from that region. This contradicts Anne Lester's canonical origins, as her backstory establishes her as having British and Czech nationality. Therefore, while the skin matches the Essence's story, it doesn't align with the canonical story. Considering this, saying Melly is Russian solely because of her Sophia's skin might be inaccurate. While there's a possibility she's Russian, it's more likely due to Alice's observation in Ashes of Memory, not her Sophia's skin. Furthermore, Melly's Russian association in that Essence likely stems from the Essence's story revolving around Agatha Christie's murder on the Orient Express. In Murder on the Orient Express, there is a Russian noble, Princess Natalia Dragomirov. I believe Melly, with her Sophia skin, represents this character. In conclusion, there is a possibility of Melly being Russian, based on Alice's commentary during their first meeting. That makes her plausible place of origins to be Greece, Italy, Eastern European region, and Southern African region. Lastly, I want to add the possibility that Melly is of British descent. As discussed previously, 19th century England was a place where black and white people lived side by side. Historically, slavery in England was abolished with the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833, which, from its effective date, made buying, selling, and owning slaves illegal in most British colonies. Some sources state that black and white people lived together in the British Empire, and interracial marriages became increasingly common, with children typically taking their father's surname. Considering this, what if Melly was born to a white mother and a black father, and bore the surname Ndlovu? While I want to consider this a possibility, the supporting evidence is limited. We know that both her parents came from a rural village and lived in poverty, with Melly eventually becoming their primary source of income. Melly's father is implied to have been a farmer, and neither parent ever left the village. Their race is not explicitly mentioned, which weakens this theory. The only supporting point, perhaps, is the possibility that Melly lived in the UK. Her backstory reveals that Melly worked for Joshua Plinius, and eventually married him. A hint from the Ashes of Memory promotional video suggests that Melly and Joshua settled in the UK, and that Joshua died there. With all of this in mind, there are 5 possible origins for Melly: Greece, Italy, Southern Africa, Eastern Europe, and the UK. However, if I were asked about Melly's true origin, I would simply say that I don't know. With so much ambiguity, it's difficult to determine where she truly comes from. One thing is certain: she might be Russian, but I wouldn't say she definitely is. The possibility exists, as so does the impossibility. This is your broadcaster, Silmina, signing out.